Well, we're joined now by Rosamund McDougall from the green think tank, the Optimum Population Trust, and by Philippe Legrain, a visiting professor at the London School of Economics, who wrote the book, Immigrants, Your Country Needs Them. Rosamund McDougall, Optimum Population Trust. Well, so what is the optimum population?
We think it's probably about half what it is now, or even lower if you look at ecological footprinting studies. Our concern is with the environmental impacts, which are going to be absolutely disastrous if we have another probably 17 million by 2050.
But the problem is we are an ageing population, we keep being. So the only way we can care for ourselves is to bring people in to do it.
No, that's not true, because we have about 8 million people economically inactive. We can easily draw on the existing population to support the future elderly population by, in fact, allowing people to work longer. That's one way.
So I asked her what the optimum population, well, what from your perspective is the optimum?
I don't think there is an optimum population. I mean, I think if we tried to get down to 30 million, I'd be very interested in how Rosamund proposes to get from here to there. I mean, cull 1 in 2 people, perhaps. In terms of the population forecast, it's just a forecast. Who knows whether it will prove to be correct? I think most people will be delighted that people are now living longer. Most parents are delighted to have their children. And one of the reasons why we need the immigrants is precisely to look after the growing number of old people and the growing number of young people.
Well, first of all, we're not suggesting that population should be reduced to 30 million, and certainly not straight away. You can't possibly do that. What we are recommending is a policy of stabilisation and gradual decrease of about 0.25% a year. And to do this actually isn't terribly difficult. You simply numerically balance migration, taking into account the age structure, and you also encourage people to have smaller families and make efforts on teenage pregnancy, so you don't have to do it that way. I would like to ask Philippe what he thinks the right sort of population. I mean, are you happy with 100 million, 200 million?
I would say if you're a green, you should care about the global environment, and all that migration does is change the pattern of where people are distributed across the world. And you might argue that actually it's better for the global environment that people will be moving from floodplains in Bangladesh to leafy Surrey, or from parts of the areas next to the Sahara, which are becoming desert, to come live in London.
Well, of course, we are incredibly underpopulated in some places. You only got a few miles outside Fort William and there are more sheep than people.
Yes, but even Scotland's population is increasing, so that will change. Over the last 20 years, we've seen population growth of considerable amount in every region of the UK, except there's been a slim decline in the northeast, and these projections show that that will be absolutely wiped out. There will be no parts of the UK where population is not increasing.
Well, I think the environment is clearly very important, but it's important because it matters to people. And while we can have economic welfare as well as more people, they're not inconsistent. In terms of is Britain full up? People used to say that back in the 1930s. In fact, the Daily Mail said, "Don't allow in the German Jews because we can't fit in more people." And suddenly now there are over 10 million more people, and we managed to all squeeze in. And as the report showed, actually most people actually choose to live in the most densely populated parts of Britain, because actually people appreciate living in close quarters rather than in isolation. And that's actually good for the environment, because people in a big city like London actually they travel far less. The distribution of say, food is far more efficient, and people who live in the country in less densely populated areas actually pose more of a strain on the environment individually.
I mean, if we look across Europe, I mean, to go to Paris, if we had the density that Paris has in London, we'd have 38 million people living here. I mean, it's surely not extreme by European standards.
We are one of the most densely populated countries in Europe, and we are the fastest growing population in Europe. And we are one of the most densely populated countries in the world. So, compared with France, we have about half the land area to support.
But in truth, if environment is the issue, is 10 million more or less really going to make much difference? Because you're talking about a huge number of people anyway.
It makes an enormous difference. We're talking about 3 million more homes by 2020. This forecast is saying there'll actually be another 1.5 million on top of that.
Yeah, okay, but if you actually think about it, 3/4 of Britain is made up of agricultural land. If we needed to build 200 houses more a day for the next 20 years, that would take up 0.15% extra of Britain's surface area, and if they lived on brownfield sites, none at all.
And in a word, if we were predicting, how many people do you actually think there'll be in 30 years?
I think soon the government's going to change its policy and actually will be bringing down levels of migration, but my goodness, we've waited a long time.
I think that migration should continue. It's a good thing.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Rosamund McDougall and Philippe Legrain.